my car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes...
Picture this. You're one of the most beloved comedians in television history. For 11 straight years, you made 30 million people laugh every single week. You've won 25 Emmy Awards. You're America's sweetheart. But there's one episode of your own show that you filmed in 1977 that you refuse to watch. Not once. Not even 47 years later. What could be so powerful, so heartbreaking, that would make the woman who brought joy to millions turn away from her own work? Today, we're diving deep into the story of Carol Burnett and the episode that was too real, too painful, and too close to home for even her to handle. This is a story about comedy, heartbreak, and the thin line between making people laugh and breaking their hearts. Carol Burnett didn't start life as America's funniest woman. She started as a little girl who learned that laughter was the only thing standing between her and complete despair. Born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas, Carol's childhood was anything but funny. Her parents were both alcoholics who couldn't take care of themselves, let alone a small child. Her father worked at a movie theater but couldn't keep any job for long. Her mother drank just as much and was emotionally absent most of the time. By the time Carol was just a toddler, she already understood what it felt like to be unwanted. The two people who were supposed to love her most had chosen bottles over bedtime stories. It was a lonely, scary world for a little girl, and Carol learned early on that if she could make people laugh, maybe they wouldn't leave her behind. When her parents completely gave up on raising her, Carol was taken in by her grandmother, Mabel White. In 1940, they packed up and moved to Hollywood, but there was no glamorous life waiting for them. They lived in a single, tiny room in a rundown boarding house filled with other broken people, addicts, mentally ill tenants, and people barely surviving on welfare, all called this place home. Carol and her grandmother lived on just $20 a week, which was barely enough for food, let alone dreams. But her grandmother, Mabel, gave Carol something she had never experienced before: unconditional love. They were poor, yes, but Carol was finally safe. And in the middle of all that chaos and poverty, something amazing happened. Carol's imagination became her superpower. She created a pretend twin sister named Karen. Karen was everything Carol wasn't: confident, beautiful, always smiling and happy. Carol made Karen so real that even the other broken-down tenants in their boarding house believed she existed. She would run up a fire escape, change her clothes, change her hair, and come back down as Karen, charming and playful. Then minutes later, she'd return as Carol. The fact that these adults, many of them barely hanging on to their own sanity, believed in Karen shows you two things: how incredibly talented Carol was at acting, and how much everyone in that sad place needed something joyful to believe in. But some escapes were more real than others. Every Saturday, Carol and her grandmother would scrape together 50 cents to go to movies. That was more than 10% of their entire weekly income. But for those few precious hours, Carol could leave behind the peeling paint, the shouting, and the constant fear. On the big screen, life sparkled. Stars danced. People kissed. There was food and beauty and order. Everything her real life wasn't. But when the credits rolled, reality came crashing back. They were so poor they couldn't even afford toilet paper at home, so they would quietly steal it from a movie theater bathroom. They weren't ashamed, they were desperate. Even at 7 years old, Carol understood what it meant to be hungry for more than just food. One day, sitting in that darkened theater, Carol heard Johnny Weissmuller's famous Tarzan yell echo through the room. It hit her like lightning. At home, she began practicing it obsessively, perfecting every pitch and rhythm. She had no idea she was training her voice, building the kind of breath control that most singers take years to master. To her, it was just a game. But that yell would later bring down audiences in laughter and applause during her live shows. What started as a child copying a movie became one of the first tools in her comedy arsenal. By the time Carol finished high school, she had one dream: journalism. Her mother had always wanted to be a writer, and Carol felt like she had to finish what her mother couldn't. UCLA was her goal, But when the time came to enroll, she faced a brutal reality. She didn't have the $50 needed for tuition. That's about $600 in today's money. For most people, it would have meant the end of the dream. Then something incredible happened. A stranger whose identity she never learned stepped forward and paid the entire amount. No strings attached, no explanation, just enough money to completely change her life. At UCLA, Carol planned to study journalism, but one theater class flipped her world upside down. In that classroom, something inside her clicked. She wasn't shy anymore. She wasn't poor or invisible. She was funny, loud, and completely alive. Her professors noticed it. So did her classmates. She could sing, act, and make people laugh all at the same time. Suddenly, journalism felt too small for what she could do. She switched majors. It was risky, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was dreaming. That risk paid off quickly. At the end of her freshman year, she was named the most promising newcomer in UCLA's theater program. It was more than just a title. It was like a prophecy. It told her she wasn't crazy for chasing this dream. It gave her the courage to push harder and stop apologizing for wanting more than just survival. Carol was just a college junior in 1954, working as an usherette for 65 cents an hour, when her life took another strange turn at a party in San Diego. She wasn't there to celebrate. She was stuffing appetizers into her purse to bring home to her grandmother. That's when a well-dressed stranger approached her. He wasn't in show business. He was a millionaire shipbuilder from La Jolla. Carol told him about her dream of going to New York to make it on Broadway, but explained that she couldn't even afford UCLA's $43 tuition. The man made her an offer that sounded too good to be true, $1,000 each for her and her boyfriend Don Soroyan. But he gave them 3 rules. Never reveal his name. Only use the money to get to New York. And if they made it, they had to help others do the same. He didn't want credit. He just said someone had once helped him, and he was paying it forward. With $2,000 in hand, Carol and Don packed up their dreams and left UCLA behind. They headed east in 1954, even though Carol had never been further than Texas. She didn't know anyone in New York, but she didn't care. She said later, "I didn't know enough to be scared." They landed in the city and checked into the Algonquin Hotel at $9 a night. It was too much money for them to spend. The cash started disappearing fast. At one point, Carol broke down crying while making a collect call to her family, who begged her to come back home. Right as she was about to give up, she heard a radio announcement. A hurricane named Carol was moving up the coast. She took it as a sign. Somehow, it gave her the strength to stay and keep fighting. Carol soon found herself in a completely different world, the rehearsal club. It was an old boarding house for young women trying to break into the arts. For $18 a week, Carol got a cot in a shared room with 4 other actresses. There was only one bathroom and one closet for everyone. But to her, it was paradise. She had been sleeping on a couch back home. The place buzzed with energy. Girls practicing lines, singing, running around with curlers in their hair. To make ends meet, Carol worked as a hat check girl at night and auditioned during the day. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was her dream coming to life, piece by piece. In March 1955, Carol and the other girls put on a show called the Rehearsal Club Review and mailed out invitations to agents and producers. Big names like Marlene Dietrich showed up. That night, doors started opening for Carol Burnett. Her first big break came from something totally ridiculous, a love song about John Foster Dulles, the stiff, ultra-serious U.S. Secretary of State. It was written by Ken Welch as a joke song, completely over the top and absurd. But Carol performed it so perfectly that it became her signature piece. Audiences went absolutely wild for it. She got invited onto the Jack Parr Show and then the Ed Sullivan Show. On January 6, 1957, she stepped out onto the Sullivan stage with her knees shaking like leaves. But by the end of her performance, people were howling with laughter. In August that same year, she went back to perform the Dulles song again, plus a parody of Puppy Love. That ridiculous ballad turned her into the talk of New York comedy. For the next 5 years, Carol kept grinding, kept pushing forward. She had small roles here and there, but in 1959, everything changed. Carol landed the lead in Once Upon a Mattress, a new off-Broadway musical that got picked up for Broadway. She played Princess Winifred, a loud, clumsy girl from the marsh who was completely unlike any fairy tale princess anyone had ever seen. The show exploded in popularity. Carol earned her first Tony nomination, and on June 22, 1959, exactly 5 years after she got that mysterious loan from the stranger, Carol and Don paid back the full $2,000. The millionaire never responded. He stayed anonymous to the very end, just like he promised. Then came the Gary Moore Show. From 1959 to 1962, Carol went from rising star to full-on television powerhouse. She won her first Emmy in 1962. Her cleaning lady character became iconic and beloved, but the real impact of that show was what it taught her about connecting with live audiences. Gary Moore's unrehearsed question-and-answer warm-ups inspired the live audience interactions that would later become the heart and soul of the Carol Burnett Show. On September 11, 1967, the Carol Burnett Show premiered, and television changed forever. Carol broke through a wall that no one thought a woman could break. For 11 straight seasons, from September 1967 to March 1978, the show pulled in 30 million viewers every single week. That wasn't just good, it was historic. Few shows have ever reached that kind of massive audience. The show became more than entertainment. It was an event that families planned their weeks around. Time magazine named it one of the 100 best television shows of all time. TV Guide placed it at number 17. That's how big and important it was. But this wasn't just about big numbers. The show changed television itself. It was one of the first variety shows to feature live comedy skits in front of a studio audience. That style went on to inspire Saturday Night Live and countless other shows. Carol wasn't just another star. She was one of the first women to lead her own variety show. At a time when most of television was run by men, she changed the rules and opened doors for countless women in comedy. During its 11-year run, the Carol Burnett Show won a jaw-dropping 25 Primetime Emmy Awards. The awards weren't all in one category either. The show won for writing, musical material, choreography, and of course, Best Variety Series. Harvey Korman picked up 4 Emmys of his own. Tim Conway won 4 as well, 3 for acting and 1 for writing. But behind all the laughter and applause, not everything was perfect. The show had its share of drama and tension. During the 7th season, Harvey Korman nearly walked away for good. He was going through a rough patch and was rude and irritable during rehearsals. Carol usually let things slide, but not this time. She pulled him aside after the Friday night taping and asked what was going on. Korman's answer was brutal. "I'm just not happy here," he said, and then slammed the dressing room door in her face. Carol called his agent and fired him on the spot. But over the weekend, Korman changed his mind. He begged for another chance. Carol agreed, but with one condition. She told him, "Monday morning, I want to see you skipping and whistling down the hallway at CBS." And that's exactly what he did. When he stepped off the elevator Monday morning, he was literally skipping and whistling. Carol burst out laughing and had a plaque made for his door that said, "Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky." Korman stayed with the show through season 10. Then there was Tim Conway, the wild card of the group. Conway had a rule: never go all out in rehearsals. He saved his best, most outrageous bits for the live tapings, even if it threw everyone else completely off their game. "Some of it comes on the spur of the moment," he once said, "and some I keep in the back of my mind." That strategy meant every performance was fresh and totally unpredictable. The most famous moment of Conway's chaos came during what fans call the elephant story. In a sketch from the Family series, he told a long, ridiculous tale about a circus elephant. As he rambled on, Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, and Dick Van Dyke tried everything they could to stay in character and not break. But the story kept getting funnier and weirder and more absurd. By the end, even Vicki Lawrence completely lost it. She hit back with a line so unexpected and hilarious that it cracked up everyone on the set, including Conway himself. Moments like that became the soul of the show, raw, real, and completely unscripted magic that you couldn't plan or fake. But not every scene was funny. In 1977, something happened that shook Carol Burnett to her very core. It came from one of the show's most popular recurring sketches called The Family. Carol played a character named Eunice Higgins, a woman weighed down by disappointment and crushed dreams. Usually, the sketch mixed comedy with family dysfunction, but this time, they decided to take a huge risk. No jokes, no exaggeration, just pure, raw pain. The sketch was called The Gong Show. In it, Eunice believes that singing her heart out on a talent show will finally launch her to the fame and recognition she's always dreamed of. Instead, the judges mock her cruelly. One of them was played by real-life game show host Alan Ludden. Carol played the role completely straight. No funny accent, no silly movements, no over-the-top physical comedy. Just a broken woman's desperate attempt to matter, to be seen, to be valued. And by the end of filming, the entire crew was close to tears. When the episode aired, it didn't lose any of its emotional punch. The camera slowly pulled back on Eunice's tear-streaked face as the lights dimmed around her. No music, no laughter, just pure heartbreak-filling television screens across America. Viewers were stunned. They had tuned in for laughs and instead got a masterpiece of human pain and vulnerability. Critics praised it as brilliant television. Awards poured in, but Carol Burnett never watched it again, not once in 47 years. In a 2010 interview, she explained why. It was too real, she said. Eunice's pain felt like my own, and that's because it was real. Carol had grown up in poverty. She knew exactly what it felt like to dream big and get laughed at, to want something so desperately and be told you weren't good enough. That sketch hit way too close to home. It brought back every moment of her childhood when she felt small, invisible, and unwanted. She later explained her feelings in an interview with Harper's Bazaar. "I'm glad we did it," she said, "but it wasn't what our show was about. We were there to make people forget their troubles, not remind them of their pain." Still, the sketch left a lasting mark on television history. It led to a TV movie in 1982 called Ununice, and eventually spawned the spin-off sitcom Mama's Family. Carol eventually walked away from the sitcom, unhappy with its direction, but that original episode remained legendary in the world of television drama. This episode represents something deeper about Carol Burnett as a person and as a performer. Here was a woman who had spent her entire career making people laugh, who had built her life around bringing joy to others, and yet she created something so painfully honest that she couldn't bear to watch it herself. Think about that for a moment. This was a woman who had performed in front of live audiences for decades, who had watched herself on television every week for 11 years, who had sat through award shows and interviews and retrospectives of her work. But this one episode, this one moment of pure truth, was too much for even her to handle. It shows you the power of great art, how sometimes the most beautiful, most meaningful work comes from the deepest pain. Carol took everything she had learned about rejection, about poverty, about feeling unwanted and unloved, and she channeled it into a performance that was so real, so raw, so completely honest that it broke hearts across America. But it also broke her own heart. Because sometimes when you're an artist, the cost of creating something truly powerful is having to relive the pain that inspired it. And for Carol Burnett, that pain was too much to bear twice. The episode became a testament to her incredible range as a performer. Here was America's sweetheart, the woman who had made millions laugh for over a decade, proving that she could break your heart just as easily as she could make you smile. It showed that behind all the comedy, all the silly voices and physical gags and musical numbers, was a woman who understood human pain in the deepest possible way. Today, Carol Burnett is 91 years old and still working. She recently appeared in Better Call Saul and Palm Royale, proving that her talent hasn't dimmed with age. But that episode from 1977 remains a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important art comes from the places that hurt us most. Carol Burnett spent her life making people laugh because she understood what it felt like to cry. She brought joy to millions because she knew what it was like to feel joyless. And in 1977, she created something so honest and so real that even she couldn't watch it again. That's the mark of a true artist. Someone who can take their deepest pain and transform it into something that touches other people's hearts. Carol Burnett did that in 1977, and 47 years later, we're still talking about it. If this story moved you, if it gave you a new appreciation for Carol Burnett and the incredible depth of her talent, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves classic television or who needs to understand that our greatest artists often create their most powerful work from their deepest wounds. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about the legends who shaped entertainment history. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important episodes are the ones that are too real to watch twice.